are back with Inez and Chuck talking about all the things. So Inez, there has been a little bit of a dust-up this week in particular between Speaker Pelosi and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. All the backstory. Okay, so Pelosi gave an interview where she sort of sniped at AOC. AOC came back at her on Twitter. Then there was a caucus meeting where reportedly Pelosi exchanged some words. Then AOC accused her of, singling out women of color. Then AOC was accused of playing the race card.
And that's where we are right now.
That brings us, I think, up to date.
Inez, what does this tell us?
The one thing that was missing in this little timeline was that AOC also accused Nancy Pelosi of encouraging or somehow inflating the death threats or the sort of online extreme attacks against her. I don't have a lot of sympathy for Nancy Pelosi on this because AOC has been, and some of the other Justice Democrats have been claiming that Republicans are inciting violence against them by criticizing them for a long time, and now I see this critique being leveled at Nancy Pelosi when in the past she's kind of echoed some of that language against Republicans, so I don't have a whole lot of sympathy there, but this is about the battle for the heart and soul of the Democratic Party, right? Where is the Democratic Party? Is it, more in the Joe Biden sort of more traditional establishment Democratic ideas, or is this more than, is AOC's new way more than just something that grabs headlines? Is this actually where the heart and soul of the Democratic base is, and is it the future? In which case, we're going to see that impact the 2020 race, and we're going to see it impact folks like Nancy Pelosi.
Inez, I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And what this goes to is about a definition of winning. It's about, do you win by passing small pieces of legislation and coalition management?
Trying to work
or
with the
do
Republicans,
you win? And AOC said this. She goes, I don't care about short-term wins. What I care about is changing the message. Chuck, I can imagine that probably resonates with somebody from the Bernie Sanders campaign. Tell us why that theory of change you think is the future for the Democratic Party.
I think that I think it leads to the demographics of where we are as a country. You have as many young people as you have boomers now. And back in the good old days when I was raised by my grandmother, there was just a different temperament on how you thought about politics. And I didn't grow up in a political family. Both of my grandparents were sharecroppers, right? So understanding the dynamics of where we are as a nation now, you have a whole bunch of young people, millennials, Generation Z, whatever they are, and they have a different mindset about policy. And they're not scared to be like, take some losses, do some big things. That's why you see the Bernie Sanders, the whole FDR thing. Let's have a big deal to fix all of this. But I take a step back from this is nothing really new. I've been a Democrat for a long, long time, going back to Texas, Southern conservative Democrats in Deep East Texas. And there's always been this fighting and this pulling of which way we want to pull the party, the platform. I remember the 1996 convention in Chicago. I was the youngest delegate from Texas. And I was trying to figure out what I was. And I didn't know. I just knew I was this union hunky who had just come out of East Texas who didn't want my plant to close. So you have people that pull that trade agenda, that union agenda, that people want to say white people that are blue collar. That's a lot of people now. That's not just white people. But you see people that are getting elected through this new generation, to your AOC point, who don't care as much about what used to happen, right? And they're trying to break some things, to fix some things, but time will still tell of which one of us is right.
Well, and I mean, Inez, it's not crazy to look at what's been going on these past few years and say, this isn't working. I mean, that's what the American people basically said when they elected Donald Trump. They said, we don't want the norms, the conventions, we don't care. This has not been working. And I think AOC is the expression on the left of trying to get together with Mitch McConnell, like, we're done with this.
Well, it's interesting because political parties are always more made up of different coalitions than the ideological line might say, right? So the party platform will say one thing, but at the end of the day, political parties are about building coalitions with different interest groups, and the Republican Party is the same way, right? You've got the Tea Party coalition that was sort of ascendant in 2010, 2012. You have the new Trump voters who have different priorities, who are considerably hetero-orthodox on some issues like trade, and then you have the party establishment. It's the same thing as happening in the Democratic Party. I do think that we're at a moment where we had 30 years or so of the parties being relatively close together, right? Sort of Bush Senior, Clinton, these folks are not super far apart. And I think they were failing to reflect a deep ideological and principled divide in the country. People always complain about, partisanship and sort of the divide in the country, but I think it reflects something real. We have a very different vision on a fundamental level about where this country should go, what it means to be an American. These are serious fundamental questions, and we're going to see division. I think you're going to start seeing the two parties reflect that more clearly.
Chuck, how much will AOC's endorsement matter in the presidential race?
It will be a huge difference in a primary. It really will be. And there's just not that many people who vote. The people who vote in the primary are Chuck Rocha or AOC. We're yellow dog Democrats. A lot of us line up to the left, and that's who we are. But I'd also like to raise light to two things that you should keep your eye on as this thing plays out. Xochitl Torres Small is a Latina who represents the Southern District in New Mexico, which is an R+4 district. Debbie Mercosur-Powell represents Homestead, Florida, South Florida, immigrant. Her district is R+1.5. Both women of color, both newly elected powerhouses into this Congress, both representing Republican districts. Watch where they line up on some of these fights. Watch, they will have a big influence when you
What
start.
have they been doing?
They've been kind of playing both sides, to be honest with you, right? Xochitl Torres Small had taken some votes that upset some of the left. Debbie Mercosur-Powell is lining up with her district that's heavily Cuban. Represents everything from Key West all the way to the Miami Zoo. I know it very well. I worked in that race. But watch where they're lining up with Pelosi and AOC, because they are friends with both, and they align with both. But they are two women of color who are extraordinarily powerful women who have hard districts.
That's another interesting thing I think you're getting at, Chuck, which is they don't always fall so neatly as Pelosi, AOC. They may agree with AOC on some things, they may agree with Pelosi on others. One thing what was interesting is AOC's chief of staff really pissed off half of Congress whenever last week he sent out a tweet comparing centrist Democrats to new Southern Democrats that certainly seem hell-bent to do black and brown people today what the old Southern Democrats did in the 40s. He's gotten obviously a lot of pushback for this, Chuck. Do you think it was an appropriate comparison?
I don't know enough about the tweet. I just know that there's a lot of tension up there, right? And this goes back to the fighting. People always have said it's a big tent. Republicans big, Democrats big tent. In the Democrats, it's a really big tent.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm saying that, and you need all of those voices. Bernie Sanders is doing so well because he was given that voice in Congress and then in the Senate, and he occupied that lane of let's do big things, let's have big ideas. And now we may win a Democratic nomination. So there's proof in the pudding that that works and that the American people are ready for that, but one size may not fit all.
What do you think, Inez?
I think one size doesn't fit all is the right strategy. These are political parties, and you're going to have. It's funny to me that every side thinks the other side is more ideologically narrow and more in line and marching in lockstep. So you hear this all the time on the Republican side. Democrats are marching in lockstep. We've got to do that too. And then vice versa, right? You just said that the Democrats
I can promise
have
y'all
a really
way
broad.
more organized. Am I wrong?
No, they're not.
Way more organized.
Nancy Pelosi is
better
queen.
funded,
Yeah,
better
she's
organized.
Yeah, exactly. Each side thinks the other side is in lockstep.
She is better than
really
Boehner, I will
well,
say that.
really well organized. And the reality is that this is a moment of ideological realignment in America. I really think that this is on the Republican side. You've got the sort of Reagan tripartite stool, Reagan-Buckley Goldwater conservatism seems to be for the first time. That's not the framework that's guiding the Republican Party. Now they had failed to implement that framework, and I'm sure that we share complaints on on the Democratic side about candidates saying one thing and then not being able to implement it. But for the first time, the ideological structure is now in flux. Yeah. And I think the same thing is largely true on the Democratic side. I think you're seeing the marriage of far-left socialist economics with intersectional politics, with SJW style social justice. And I think that's probably the future of the Democratic Party.
All right, control room's going to be mad at me because they want us to wrap. But I have one more question for Chuck, which is your theory of political change, the political revolution, right? Say you get into the White House. Senator Sanders is now President Sanders. What does that look like when you're actually president? Like, what does governing through that theory of political change look like?
It's a great question, and he answered it this week in a Now This video. He talked about how he wants to, with his presidency, that there is a huge group of people, whether they're Republican, Democrats, Libertarians, who feel empowered that they actually made a difference. And we throw around political revolution, but we really mean it. And we mean it in a way of really people getting empowered to force. He talked about Mitch McConnell. He's like, how can you work with Mitch McConnell? You engage the people of Kentucky and empower them to rise up to say, this is what I want. If it's something as basic as fixing our roads and bridges, you empower the people to put pressure on their government, and that's how you actually govern. And that's the way we would look at it.
Interesting. Thank you both.
Thanks to you both.
Happy Friday. Enjoy the weekend.
Thank
See you
you.
guys soon. Coming up, a prominent member of her own party, once Amy McGrath, primaried in her Senate bid against Mitch McConnell. Hasn't gone so well so far. And a gubernatorial candidate in Mississippi invokes the Bill Graham rule.
We'll take a culinary tour of Finland, the chef to the ambassador of Finland. All that when Rising continues.